It looks like it's going to be a white Hanukkah this year. There isn't much time until the holiday season, and Israel has finally had its first snowfall of the year. Hermon Mountain in the country's north saw its very first winter storm of 2020 as it gets into gear to welcome winter sports enthusiasts. Meanwhile, heavy flooding all over the country this weekend, with emergency services rescuing dozens of people and power outages nationwide. Now joining me is Guy Caspi. He's in charge of Magen David Adom Emergency Services, Intensive Care and Ambulances. Thank you, sir, for joining me.
Thank you for having me here with you.
Well, over the weekend, was the most rain we've had this year so far. There were dozens of rescues, including some extreme flooding in Nes Ziona. Roads were closed in Tel Aviv. How bad was the situation over the weekend? Tell me about some of the situations you encountered personally.
Well, since late night Friday, dozens of calls were received in MDA dispatch centers regarding people trapped in different floods, mainly in the urban setup. But in all actually of those events, the people were rescued by the fire services without any harm. The big incident, or the major incident, took place on Saturday morning in Nes Ziona, where a couple of buildings were actually flooded. And the main issue was that there were some basements that were totally flooded. And there was a big questions about if there are any casualties inside. So we, along with the fire services, were working on site, waiting for them to take care of the incidents, and this incident as well ended with no casualties.
So how does this year compare to previous years so far in terms of the amount of rain? Will this winter be worse than last year?
Well, this is a question you should ask the meteorologist, not me. I can talk about numbers of calls.
So far from what we've seen, from the first storm, compared to the first storm last year, what are we looking at?
I can't really answer this question, but it was a challenge. But in general, when we in Magen David Adom are facing those scenarios, we are getting ready. And that means that we spread our resources, we coordinate with the police and the fire services, and compare, for example, for last year that we have some casualties in one of the floods. In this incident, no casualties at all.
So obviously you've been doing this for a while. You've taken part in a lot of different rescues. I wonder if you can give me an example of sort of a rescue that you were involved with that really stuck with you or moved you, something that you really remember.
In the last years, actually, I was not on the field, but at the operations center. And it's a little bit more complicated when you're not, as we say, boots on the ground, and you receive the information and you hear the radio. And I can recall one of the incidents where there were two people were trapped in an elevator in Tel Aviv last year. And our first responders and ambulances arrived at the scene with the police and the fire services, and they were struggling to rescue them. And unfortunately, at the end, they recover just the bodies.
Right. I think everyone in this country remembers that tragedy. It was a really horrible story. And now I'm wondering, for those people that find themselves stuck in dangerous situations during winter weather, what advice can you give to Israelis who want to stay safe in this weather?
First of all, follow the instructions. The fire services, the police, as well as Magen David Adom, are providing information to the general public about how to behave in those scenarios. And if you're stuck in an emergency, if you have a medical emergency, you should dial immediately 101 to Magen David Adom, and the dispatcher will provide you the information and the instruction. If you're just having a situation where you're trapped in water, you should call either the police or the fire services. They will instruct you in the same way.
All right, some very good advice. Guy Caspi, thank you so much for keeping us safe. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.